You probably see Australia as one of the most beautiful countries on Earth. But beauty isn't what defines this continent. The real story is the force that shaped everything long before people ever arrived. Across Australia, that force created landscapes and forms of life found nowhere else on Earth. So before we move through Australia's most remarkable places, one question comes first. What happens when an entire continent is left alone? Australia was not always isolated. What did this continent look like before it became the world's most isolated land? The answer lies in the Flinders Ranges. Today, these red mountains stretch for more than 430 kilometers across South Australia. But between 800 and 540 million years ago, this entire landscape lay beneath a deep, ancient sea. Hidden inside the rocks are some of the oldest complex fossils ever discovered on Earth. Many of these strange organisms had no eyes, no mouths, and no digestive systems. They lived hundreds of millions of years before fish or dinosaurs appeared. At the heart of the range lies Wilpena Pound, a vast natural basin surrounded by sweeping folded ridges, preserving the shape of an ancient seabed lifted high above the desert. Then the Earth began to change. Deep beneath the surface, tectonic forces slowly pulled Australia away from Antarctica. The ocean between them widened until the continent became completely isolated from the rest of the southern world. From that moment, Australia began following an evolutionary path found nowhere else on Earth. After the last ice age, rising sea levels cut Kangaroo Island off from mainland Australia. In just 10,000 years, the island followed a completely different path from the rest of the country. As you arrive, more than 540 kilometers of rugged coastline, towering limestone cliffs, and relentless waves from the Southern Ocean stretch out before you. The farther you explore, the more unusual the island becomes. While foxes spread across much of mainland Australia, they never reached Kangaroo Island. As a result, many marsupials and ground-nesting birds still survive here, including the Kangaroo Island dunnet, one of the rarest marsupials on Earth. On the island's western tip, the remarkable rocks are giant granite formations, sculpted by wind and sea salt over nearly 500 million years. Kangaroo Island is also home to the last pure Ligurian honeybee population on Earth. For more than a century, every other honeybee has been banned from entering the island to protect that unique genetic line. But the island also hides an unexpected paradox. Koalas are not native here. They were introduced during the 1920s for conservation and later multiplied far beyond expectations. When Matthew Flinders landed here in 1802, kangaroos were so abundant that they fed his crew for days, giving the island the name it still carries today. Yet even this isolated world could not escape every threat. During the Black Summer bushfires, nearly half of the island burned, pushing many endemic species to the edge of survival. For hours, the landscape barely changes. On both sides of the road, there is little more than low saltbush, pale limestone, and a horizon that seems to stretch forever. That is the experience of crossing the Nullarbor Plain, a treeless plain covering more than 200,000 square kilometers. Few people realize that this entire landscape lay beneath an ancient sea about 10 to 20 million years ago. As the sea retreated, it left behind the world's largest limestone plateau and an almost perfectly flat landscape with virtually no natural obstacles. Over millions of years, rainwater slowly dissolved the limestone, creating countless caves beneath the surface, while the land above became increasingly dry. Kangaroos, dingoes, and feral sheep survive by blending almost perfectly into the colors of the plain. To cross this region, nearly everyone follows the air highway. Its 90-mile straight stretches for nearly 147 kilometers without a single bend, making it one of the longest straight roads in the world. Fresh water is so scarce that many roadside stops depend on rainwater collection or water transported by tanker trucks from hundreds of kilometers away. In a place with almost no landmarks, even a solitary tree like lone gum is important enough to appear on maps. After sunset, the sky becomes so dark that the Magellanic Clouds can be seen clearly with the naked eye. Nullarbor is not a land without life. It is a place where every form of life has adapted to an almost endless expanse. And that vast emptiness has transformed what was once an ancient seabed into one of Australia's most isolated landscapes. Rottnest Island is only 18 kilometers from the city of Perth, yet it feels like a completely different world. Around 7,000 years ago, Rising sea levels submerged the coastal plain and cut this island off from mainland Australia. As soon as you set foot on the island, you will see the sea constantly changing color, from foaming white above the coral reefs to turquoise, before suddenly turning deep navy blue at the edge of the continental shelf. The more you explore, the more different the island becomes. While quokkas are declining on mainland Australia because of foxes and feral cats, Rottnest is home to the world's largest and most stable quokka population. When Dutch explorer Willem de Vlaming landed here in 1696, he mistook the quokkas for giant rats and named the island Rottnest, meaning Rat's Nest Island. Today, private cars are completely banned on the island, and bicycles have become the main form of transportation, helping preserve its naturally quiet environment. But behind this peaceful landscape lies a little-known chapter of history. More than 370 Aboriginal prisoners died here from disease, malnutrition, and abuse during Australia's colonial period. Many of the island's limestone buildings, including the hotels that stand today, were built by their own labor. Rottnest is not only a sanctuary for quokkas. It also preserves both the natural beauty and the painful memories of Australia's history. If you want to see what Earth looked like billions of years ago, you do not need to travel back in time. You only need to come to Shark Bay. At Hamelin Pool, ancient stromatolites are still growing layer by layer, just as the first microorganisms did when they began producing oxygen for Earth's atmosphere about 3.5 billion years ago. So, what has allowed them to survive for so long? The answer lies in one of the saltiest marine environments on Earth, where only a limited number of organisms can adapt. Within these waters spreads the world's largest seagrass ecosystem, covering more than 4,000 square kilometers. A recent study even suggests that part of this seagrass meadow may be a single organism that has cloned itself for about 4,500 years. This ecosystem supports more than 28 species of sharks and a population of wild dolphins that has voluntarily interacted with humans for over 50 years. At least 35% of the plants and animals found here exist nowhere else on Earth. Even Shell Beach is not made of sand, but of billions of tiny Phragum erugatum shells that have accumulated over about 4,000 years. These are not simply remnants of the past. At Shark Bay, the past is still alive. Along the northeastern coast of Australia, isolation does not exist only on land, but also continues beneath the sea. The Great Barrier Reef stretches for more than 2,300 kilometers along the coast of Queensland, becoming the largest living structure ever created by organisms on Earth. Billions of tiny coral polyps have built this reef together over hundreds of thousands of years. They survive through a symbiotic relationship with zooxanthellae algae, which provide energy through photosynthesis, while the corals provide shelter. Today, the reef is home to about 1/3 of the world's hard coral species, along with thousands of species of fish, mollusks, and other marine organisms. It is also an important breeding ground for humpback whales, green sea turtles, and many species that migrate across the Pacific Ocean. For Aboriginal communities and Torres Strait Islander peoples, the Great Barrier Reef has been part of dreaming stories and marine knowledge passed down for tens of thousands of years. Each year, after a full moon night when the seawater reaches the right temperature, millions of coral colonies simultaneously release eggs and sperm into the ocean, creating one of the largest synchronized reproductive events on the planet. Australia's isolation not only created endemic animals on land, but also helped form one of the world's most distinctive marine ecosystems. Beneath the surface lies the largest coral reef on the planet. But it is the isolated interior beyond that coastline that makes Australia different from the rest of the world. And that is where the journey continues. Most people see Pilbara as an endless red desert. Geologists see a version of Earth from 3.5 billion years ago. Beneath your feet lie some of the oldest exposed rocks ever found on the planet, formed when Earth's atmosphere contained almost no oxygen. Hidden within them are stromatolites, the fossilized remains of the first microbial communities that began producing oxygen on Earth. Without them, forests, animals, and humans might never have existed. Today, this landscape still looks like a prehistoric world. Beneath a deep blue sky that almost turns violet, red Earth stretches to the horizon, where temperatures frequently rise above 45 degrees Celsius. Hidden beneath those ancient rocks is one of the world's richest iron ore deposits, carried every day by freight trains that can reach 3 kilometers in length. NASA uses this region as a natural Mars analog because very few places on Earth have preserved such an ancient surface. Pilbara is not only a window into Australia's past. It shows how an isolated continent has preserved some of the earliest chapters in Earth's history. Blue Mountains is not really a mountain range. It is a vast sandstone plateau that was uplifted about 50 to 100 million years ago, with almost no deformation. Over millions of years, water carved this massive rock into a maze of canyons, some of them more than 1,000 meters deep. This natural barrier isolated Sydney from Australia's interior during the first 25 years of the colonial era. From a distance, the entire plateau appears covered by a blue haze. That blue color is created when tiny oil droplets, released by millions of eucalyptus trees, mix with water vapor and scatter sunlight. Today, the Greater Blue Mountains covers more than 1 million hectares and contains the world's greatest diversity of eucalyptus species. But its greatest secret lies deep within its remote canyons. In 1994, scientists discovered the Wollemi pine, a tree whose lineage dates back about 200 million years and was once believed to have become extinct during the age of dinosaurs. The exact location of its natural population remains a closely guarded secret to protect it from human disturbance. Right beside one of Australia's largest modern cities, Blue Mountains still preserves a prehistoric world where time seems to have stood still. In the middle of Australia's vast central desert, a massive rock rises above the flat landscape and can be seen from more than 100 kilometers away. This is Uluru. Although it stands 348 meters high, it is only the visible part of a gigantic monolith that extends about 2.5 kilometers beneath the ground. That is why Uluru is regarded as the world's largest monolith, when its hidden underground mass is taken into account. During the day, its surface absorbs heat so quickly that ground temperatures can reach 70 degrees Celsius, yet at night they can fall below freezing. As the sun moves across the sky, Uluru changes from deep purple at dawn to bright orange, then deep red, and finally dark brown at sunset. Hidden on top of the rock are small rock pools that appear only after rare desert rains. These pools are the only place where ancient crustaceans, such as shield shrimp, can survive, lying dormant in dry mud for months until the water returns. The Anangu people learned to survive by following the water. Rather than settling permanently, they moved between these natural rock pools because water has always determined life in the desert. It is part of Earth's ancient history, and part of the living memory of the people who have shared this landscape for tens of thousands of years. Leaving the deep gorges of Karijini and continuing north, the land becomes wider, emptier, and far harder to reach. This is Kimberley, one of the last regions of Australia still almost cut off from the modern world. It is nearly 3 times the size of England, yet only about 40,000 people live here. To reach the interior, you have almost one choice, the Gibb River Road, where you can travel for days without passing a single town. That distance has helped Kimberley remain almost unchanged for millions of years. Beneath your feet lie Precambrian rocks, more than 2 billion years old, among the oldest exposed parts of Earth's crust. Along the Fitzroy River, saltwater crocodiles occur at one of the highest densities in the world and can swim hundreds of kilometers upstream into the interior. The dry season lasts from 6 to 8 months, yet giant boab trees survive by storing enormous amounts of water inside their trunks. Across the cliffs, Wandjina paintings, more than 4,000 years old, and the mysterious Gwion figures preserve one of the world's oldest continuous cultural traditions. Offshore, tides can rise and fall by as much as 12 meters, completely reshaping the coastline within only a few hours. Kimberley reveals what happens when an entire region is left almost untouched. From above, you would never guess why Karijini is so famous. Ahead of you lies nothing but a dry red plateau stretching to the horizon. But the moment you descend just a few meters, the entire landscape changes. Narrow gorges open beneath your feet, revealing rock layers that have existed for more than 2.5 billion years, dating back to Earth's earliest days. Red, purple, and gray rock walls have been polished by flowing water over millions of years until they resemble carefully finished stone. As you go deeper, the air becomes noticeably cooler. Inside Hancock Gorge, some passages are so narrow that sunlight reaches the canyon floor for only a short time each day. Yet the darkest place is where the greatest abundance of life survives. Ancient groundwater feeds crystal-clear pools and sustains rainforest plants in the middle of this dry plateau. For the Bani Jima people, this is not simply a gorge, but a place where the spirits of their ancestors still remain. But do not let the calm water fool you. After heavy rain upstream, these peaceful pools can become destructive flash floods within just a few minutes. Perhaps that is the true nature of Karijini. It is a place that can only be truly discovered once you step beneath its surface. At first glance, Wave Rock looks exactly like a gigantic ocean wave about to crash onto the ground. Yet the remarkable thing is that it was never created by the sea. This enormous granite rock, 15 meters high and 110 meters long, began forming about 2.7 billion years ago as magma slowly cooled deep beneath the Earth's surface. Over millions of years, wind, water, and weathering gradually smoothed the rock, creating the almost perfect curve seen today. As the sunlight changes throughout the day, the entire rock face appears to move like a frozen wave. Wave Rock is only one section of Hayden Rock, a much larger granite outcrop. For generations, Hayden Rock has acted as a natural catchment, collecting rainwater and providing a precious water source for the dry farmland surrounding it. Standing on top of the rock, you can see flat agricultural plains stretching all the way to the horizon. That contrast makes Wave Rock look like a stone island rising from a vast sea of wheat. Although it has existed for nearly 2.7 billion years, this granite mass has changed very little because of its extraordinary hardness. What is even more surprising is that geologists have found no evidence that this area was submerged beneath the ocean during the most recent geological history. Yet it still carries the unmistakable shape of a perfect wave. Perhaps that is what makes Wave Rock so extraordinary. It has the shape of the ocean, yet it was sculpted entirely by time. Long red sand dunes stretch across the Simpson Desert in parallel lines, forming the longest and largest parallel dune system on Earth. The desert covers more than 176,500 square kilometers across the Northern Territory, Queensland, and South Australia. Some dunes, including Big Red, rise as high as 30 to 40 meters, turning every crossing into a real challenge for off-road vehicles. Iron oxide gives the sand its deep red color, standing in sharp contrast to the brilliant blue sky and the scattered silver-green spinifex. Yet, the most remarkable part of the Simpson Desert lies beneath the surface. The Great Artesian Basin extends beneath the desert, feeding the rare mound springs that sustain life in this arid landscape. Fossils of giant marsupials reveal that Simpson was once far wetter and supported a much richer ecosystem than it does today. Its extreme isolation made it one of the last parts of mainland Australia to be explored from the air in 1936, and even today, its population density remains close to zero. After dark, the dust lanes of the Milky Way shine above the red dunes, while the ancient groundwater continues to flow silently beneath them. Great Victoria Desert is nothing like the endless golden sand dunes often seen in movies. Instead, it is Australia's largest desert, covering more than 348,000 square kilometres, from Western Australia to South Australia. You can travel for hours without seeing a permanent settlement or a reliable water source. More than 70% of the desert is covered by spinifex, a tough, razor-sharp grass that forms a natural barrier across the landscape. Water is so scarce that dingoes and feral cats obtain most of their moisture directly from the prey they hunt. For the Pila Nguru people, the most valuable resource has never been food. It is knowing exactly which rock holes still hold water after the rare desert rains. That knowledge has allowed them to survive in this landscape for tens of thousands of years. Its extreme isolation also led Britain to choose part of the desert at Maralinga for nuclear weapons tests during the 1950s. Even today, it remains one of the least visited regions in Australia. There are no city lights. There is almost no moisture in the air. In return, the Milky Way stretches brilliantly across the night sky with remarkable clarity. Great Victoria Desert is not a place without life. It is a place where every form of life begins with the ability to survive isolation. Every river across Central Australia eventually ends in the same place. That place is Katitanda Lake Eyre, the lowest point on the continent and the final destination for water draining from a basin covering more than 1/6 of Australia. Some floodwaters begin in Queensland and travel thousands of kilometers before finally reaching the lake. But not a single river flows out to the sea. Under the intense desert heat, the water can only evaporate, leaving behind salt deposits up to 45 centimeters thick across the lake bed. As a result, the lake has filled completely only about 4 times over the past 100 years. Whenever the water returns, ancient shield shrimp hatch almost immediately. Fish populations explode, and thousands of birds arrive to take advantage of the brief abundance. For the Arabana people, Katithanda is a sacred place connected to water spirits and ceremonies that have been performed for generations to call for rain. The name Lake Eyre honors explorer Edward John Eyre, but Katithanda remains the traditional name used by the Arabana people. When the lake is full, its surface can cover about 9,500 square kilometers, reflecting the sky like a giant mirror. Just a few months later, the water disappears again, leaving behind a vast white salt plain stretching to the horizon. Most journeys across Central Australia pass through Alice Springs. In the vast red center, it is one of the very few places where people can continue traveling through the isolated interior. The town lies within the MacDonnell Ranges, where mountains more than 300 million years old preserve gorges, shade, and the desert's rare water sources. The Todd River runs through Alice Springs but remains almost completely dry throughout the year, leading locals to say that if you see it flow 3 times, you will stay here forever. Even in the gorges near the town, rare black-footed rock wallabies continue to survive in the arid environment. For the Arrernte people, the MacDonnell Ranges are the traces of the Yeperenye ancestors in dreaming stories passed down for tens of thousands of years. In 1872, the Overland Telegraph Line passed through this area and connected Central Australia with the rest of the world for the first time. Today, Alice Springs remains the most important stopping point before the roads continue to disappear into the red center. Daintree is not just the oldest tropical rainforest in Australia. It is one of the oldest surviving rainforests on Earth. Formed around 180 million years ago, Daintree already existed during the age of dinosaurs, long before Australia broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana. As Australia drifted north, Daintree drifted with it, carrying an ancient ecosystem into a world of isolation. Sheltered between the Great Dividing Range and the Coral Sea, this rainforest covers about 1,200 square kilometers and escaped the severe ice ages that erased many ancient forests elsewhere on Earth. That is why some of the world's most primitive flowering plants are still growing here, almost unchanged from their ancestors millions of years ago. Daintree is also one of the very few places on Earth where a tropical rainforest meets the Great Barrier Reef directly. As you enter the forest, deep emerald canopies stretch all the way to the bright white shores of the Coral Sea. In the river estuaries, saltwater crocodiles rule the waterways, moving freely between the ocean and freshwater streams deep inside the rainforest. Above the canopy, the Cairns birdwing, Australia's largest butterfly with a wingspan of nearly 16 centimeters, glides through the forest with brilliant neon green wings. Daintree preserves more than an ancient rainforest. It preserves a living world that has disappeared from almost everywhere else on Earth. How could a natural wonder, covering about 240,000 hectares, remain almost invisible to the modern world? The answer is Honolulu. It was not until 1983 that the outside world truly discovered this place, after it appeared in a documentary film. The reason is simple. The terrain is so rugged that most of Honolulu cannot be fully seen from the ground. Even today, the best way to understand its true scale is from a helicopter. From above, hundreds of beehive-shaped sandstone domes emerge across the wilderness of the Kimberley. These formations were created from sand and gravel deposited by ancient rivers about 350 to 375 million years ago. Over millions of years, water eroded the sandstone into beehive-shaped domes found almost nowhere else on Earth. The orange bands are iron oxide, while the black bands are lichens that grow only where the rock retains more moisture. Deeper inside the gorges, wallaroos move effortlessly along narrow rock ledges where very few other animals can survive. For the Gija people, however, Honolulu has never been a forgotten place. Its name means sandstone and is connected to ancestral stories and survival knowledge passed down through thousands of years. Perhaps Honolulu never disappeared at all. It simply took the modern world far too long to find it. Australia drifted away from the rest of the world tens of millions of years ago. But if you want to see the world that existed before that isolation began, you have to travel to Tasmania. As you step into this wilderness, you are entering one of only 3 great temperate wilderness regions left in the southern hemisphere, where forests descended from Gondwana have survived for nearly 60 million years. Towering eucalyptus trees rise almost 100 meters above the forest, while Huon pines, more than 2,000 years old, still grow beside rivers carved by Ice Age glaciers. As you venture deeper, the landscape begins to reveal an even older story. But isolation preserved more than human history. It also protected species the rest of the world lost long ago.